Barry Polchininoff, and welcome to Shore Things. We have so many amazing benefits being here by the shoreline. Whether you live here full-time, part-time, or you're here for a visit, we are blessed with this beautiful coastal that we have in Connecticut. And that's the topic of today's program. We're going to talk today about coastal resiliency, a very important topic for all of us, whether you live here or come to visit. To help us with our discussion today, we have two members of the Executive Coastal Resiliency Committee, Chris Costa, City Planner, Town Planner at Old Saybrook, and Peter Gillespie, which is our own Westbrook Town Planner. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. This is so important. I think I mentioned I had somebody on from the Council of Beaches recently, and this committee comes up quite a bit in the conversation. So I'd love to start by getting some background and information out there so our viewers can understand more about the reason behind it and the mission.
Sure.
Yeah.
You want to start, Chris? Or?
Yeah.
Sure. So obviously we live on the shoreline, and we've got flooding, and we've got beautiful marine and resources. But lately we've seen the water come up a little bit, and neighborhoods have been concerned, not just in Old Saybrook, in different towns. And about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I got a call from actually a Westbrook resident asking for myself as the Old Saybrook town planner. At the time, Peter wasn't hired till February of 2022. And it was right before, and they called in the winter and said, "Can you join us for a Zoom meeting? We'd like to talk to you. We have some concerns." And it was Westbrook residents, it was Old Saybrook residents, and the topic was sea level rise. And at the time, it was a lot of the same things that we heard in Old Saybrook from Westbrook residents. And when Peter got hired, we met, we went to lunch, and we talked about our sea level rise issues, resiliency issues, elevating homes, all different topics. And we teamed up and decided to apply for a grant. So we asked Clinton and Fenwick to join us. And Peter did most of the heavy lifting as far as the grant writing. But we applied and received a grant. It was a Long Island Sound Future Funds grant for a multi-town study.
And that's basically, so Peter, that's basically what this is, your committee doing a study.
Yes, this executive committee is overseeing a planning, a regional planning effort. We received funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which is a pretty competitive grant program. So we were fortunate enough to receive that funds, and I think we were able to convince them about the importance by doing this regionally. So it's kind of a unique effort that four towns get together. I haven't really been involved in my work history with four towns working together on any particular project. So
and you just took the grant writing on? You just researched that, found this grant?
Well, we all knew about the grant, but we worked with the four towns to put together the grant. I took the lead, or Westbrook's taking the lead on the grant, so we're the recipients of the grant, but in partnership with our neighboring towns.
With the four towns. So tell me some more about the committee. So you have this executive committee overseeing the planning part. And what is the mission of this whole planning part?
So the projections that the state has put out there is that sea level rise will increase 20 inches by the year 2050. So that kind of gets your attention and has put the issue, at least as a top priority for our towns to address this issue, see what the future is going to hold, study where the problems are, come up with some solutions. So we've hired a consultant to help us go through that effort. They have the technical expertise that we need. They're going to do modeling. They're going to take a look at the projections and go even beyond the 2050 horizon to see where sea level will increase throughout the four communities. So they will project that out. We will look at what additional properties are potentially going to be impacted by this, what town facilities might be impacted, what roads are going to be impacted, how drainage is going to be impacted. So we're looking at a whole myriad of issues in terms of what sea level rise might do to the communities. And then at the end of this process, we're going to hopefully come up with some recommendations that we can pursue over the years to come. And the good news is there's there seems to be funding out there.
I'm glad you said the good news, because I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on 20 inches.
Yes.
I'm thinking of my neighborhood, I'm thinking of the drives we take along the shoreline, and that just, when you say consultants then, are these consultants public engineers? Is that the background, so that you're looking at engineering and structural changes?
It's a team of professionals. They're planners, there are scientists, there are engineers. They are charged with coming up with some conceptual plans for some of the problem areas that we're going to identify as part of the process, giving us an idea of what those solutions might be, and also helping us figure out what the cost might be, so that those grant opportunities that are out there will be in a position to submit applications for them. So that's generally the idea that we're pursuing, and these consultants have done this kind of work elsewhere,
Right.
so we're pretty excited about that.
So that's interesting you said that once you get your planning and the research, you're doing all that, then you can look ahead to some grant opportunities. But is there funding out there for these type of issues? Are there funds available?
Yes, the state of
Yeah.
Connecticut has started to step up. They just put out some planning grant funds relatively recently.
Yeah.
There are federal funds, so there are resources out there. So we're hopeful that we can put ourselves in a position to tap into those by going through this planning process. So we're hopeful that we will qualify for that as we go through and identify some of the solutions.
How is your committee composed then? Because you're Old Saybrook and you're Westbrook, and you mentioned Fenwick and Clinton. So do you all come together? Do you have representatives from all the 4 towns that come together to do this planning?
Yes, so we
Christine?
have
Yeah.
a staff member from each town,
Oh, you do?
town planners.
Yeah.
And then each town has a representative. So for example, the representative Old Saybrook is a member of our planning commission, and then kind of goes back and reports to the other members and people in town, as to what we're doing, and is kind of our resident representative for Old Saybrook.
I'm just asking too, because I know I looked on the Westbrook site and it had the Westbrook committee. So one member of that Westbrook committee would come to your more executive, not, the global committee. Yeah.
So we're a little bit different. Though. So Old Saybrook started a sea level rise committee, kind of an in-house committee.
Yeah.
It was 2014. We had a study done in 2018 where we hired a consultant.
Oh, you did?
That's now 5 years old. Westbrook did not have a sea level rise committee. Clinton did not have a sea level rise committee. And Fenwick did not. And Fenwick and Old Saybrook, we obviously work pretty closely together. So the thought was the other towns could catch up.
I was thinking you have some background already.
So Old Saybrook
that's good.
did not start
Right.
a new sea level rise committee, but we're going to start with our foundation from what we've had, build on that. And the idea was that flooding and sea level rise and climate change, it doesn't stop at the town line. So I think that was one of the points that made our grant proposal interesting, because different neighborhoods do different things. So one neighborhood will put up a seawall and repair it, but it may impact the neighborhood next door. So trying to get a more global approach and try to pinpoint projects was our thought, and then work more collaboratively together to get a bigger picture.
A lot more comprehensive than, as you said, towns or sections of towns working independently to address their issues. If we could put the graphic up, we have a graphic to talk more about the committee as well. Do you find, you mentioned flooding and rising sea levels, are those the 2 big issues you're finding as you do some of your?
So rising sea levels is kind of the common denominator.
common
Each
denominator.
town has
Yeah.
specific issues such as flooding. And we're going through that process right now to have community input on that, identify problem areas in the communities. The website has some interactive tools to do that. We can go to the website, you can identify your neighborhood, identify a particular problem area, describe that in more detail so that the consultants can then take a harder look at that.
Okay, and this is one of our mailings that you have, or one of your informational
Yep, this is our
parts
this is our
here.
brochure that we've put together. So it primarily is promoting the website that we've created, which is www.foreshoreresiliency.com. we thought that was kind of a cute.
I guess so. You have
Yes,
the four
yes,
areas
with
in
the
there.
with the 4 towns, the 4 shores representative. So we've got a couple of community events coming up and some workshops, and the idea is to really drive people to the website, to take a visit, take a look at the background information, provide some guidance and input to that. We've got some events coming up. Actually, we've had a couple already, and then we've got some public workshops coming up that we're encouraging people to attend,
To part
either in
of it.
person or virtually.
So when you're gathering this info, because you have some, as you mentioned, these pop-up events. I mentioned I went to the one in Westbrook and I was encouraged to put down any concerns I had. So there were a lot of sticky notes on the maps, it was very interesting to see how many were repeats and other ideas that people had as far as their concerns go. But you have all the information, and you mentioned earlier, that's where the consultants come in. They take that and...
So the consultants are sort of coordinating the effort on the technical level for us. So any public input that we get, they are compiling that. They will present a report back to us with, as you say, what are the common areas, problem areas that we need to look at, and we'll talk about that and decide how to proceed. But we're at the early stages. We've just started the process. We just, I think, literally 2 weeks ago, put the website together and put it out there for public input. So it's going to be the place to find out, what's going on in the planning process over the next year, what the latest, updates are, when are the next meetings, those kinds of things.
Oh, great. We're going to take a short break.
Sure.
We'll be right back after this short break to talk more about the chances and opportunities you have to become involved as well. Be right back.
Smart TVs and streaming services have taken over the television industry. VSC TV is proud to announce our presence on Apple TV and Roku to make watching your favorite shows even easier. You can access this service by downloading the Cablecast ScreenWeave app. Then choose Valley Shore Community TV from the list of channels. Select VSC TV Live to watch our channel in full HD. Or pick a show from our on-demand video library. VSC TV is your local Connecticut Mid-Shore Valley digital connection.
Hi, welcome back to Shore Things. Today we're talking about coastal resiliency with town planner Chris Costa from Old Saybrook and Peter Gillespie from Westbrook. Thank you again for being here. We were talking about the committee and the charge of the committee, your mission. And I know I'd asked during break, but I'd love you to talk about that again. What is your goal for this year? You just started.
So we just started, but we have an ambitious schedule to complete the plan within a year. So by July 1st of next year, we hope to have a final plan and have it in place to be approved by the various communities and go on to the next stage, which would be implementation of the plan.
So when you mention plan, because that's, I'm thinking of these communities and some of the things, again, that I read as I was there might be quite a bit on your bucket list. There are a lot of things that you might have to address. A plan is just, this is what we see as our main goals and objectives that we're going to target, and then you move forward on that after that year. That's what the hope is?
Well, I think they'll be more specific than
They will.
that. There'll be specific projects. As I mentioned before, the consultants are also charged with coming up with a handful of projects for each community, doing a conceptual plan for it, coming up with a cost analysis to see what it's worth so that we have something we can take to the next level for funding. But then there'll also be smaller individual recommendations. They might not be projects. They might be a change to a regulation or adoption of a policy or something along those lines. It's hard to say at this point because we're at the beginning stages, but that's generally the idea. So there'll be a host of different recommendations.
It's interesting you mentioned policies too, because I noticed again on our website for Westbrook that there's our Beach Council's person is on there as well on this committee.
Yes.
So I could see that might have to go back. That council represents all our beaches, and they would need to know if there was policy change or things they could do better that again influence all the way up the coastline. As far as other communities in Connecticut, coastline communities, is this also being done, or are we at the forefront, or do you know of other communities that have taken this on besides in our immediate? area?
Yeah, I think as we talked about earlier, Old Saybrook is probably ahead of the other 3 towns in terms of identifying resiliency issues. Other towns in Connecticut are also maybe even farther ahead of some of the towns that are actually implementing projects. I would say Westbrook is a little bit behind, delayed, so it varies, up and down the coast. But there are some who are well ahead of us and had the foresight to do a plan.
Right. Which might be their advantage, because then you can also go and see their resources and some of the other factors that they considered. And again, as we talk about, like you mentioned before, Chris, about how it influences everyone, your neighbors, whatever you do. So that's why I'm thinking the whole shoreline, New Groton, New London, all the way down, everything's going to influence what happens. So I could see that this would have to be, a statewide initiative as well.
And as we said earlier, the state is starting to, initiate some funding opportunities, and they've got, the organization Circa, which has been in existence for a number of years, is kind of leading that effort, and the DEP. So we're going to engage with those organizations as well as part of this effort, get their insight and their expertise. We just had some outreach last week with some of those organizations, so it's important that we get that guidance.
As I mentioned earlier, I was looking at the website on that Circa, that Connecticut Institute, and they from University of Connecticut.
Yes.
Is that what they're based out of? Yeah, and they seem to have a lot of research, a lot of information on resources as well. So they're basically leading the charge, as you said.
They're the the statewide leader in resilience, and have been that way for a number of years.
I'm going to ask a really basic question. I know the answer is probably no, but now we're talking that this is really all coming about because of climate change, right? The rising sea levels, I think everyone's agreeing with that. The scientists agree with that. Anything that we tell people or you tell people that can help reduce this prediction of the 20-inch rise by 2050? You can tell I'm still nervous about that.
It does definitely get your attention when you see those numbers and you try and fit that in your mind's eye. We're going to project even beyond that to take an even longer term view to see how those. But we do have some experts who are going to look at the hydrology and do some modeling as to what wave action is going to be on the sound, how it's going to impact the individual communities. So we're going to take an even more detailed look. And how it impacts the 4 communities.
But it sounds like we're beyond saying, it helps if you turn your water off or whatever. I mean, we're beyond, it sounds like, making an impact enough on climate change to avoid this.
Well, you hope we have an impact, or we're able to have an impact on it, but it's a global issue, and it's beyond our local control. So we're looking at how we can adapt, how we can modify how we conduct things. We may have to raise some roads and further protect the shoreline in certain areas. We're going to have to look at all of those things in a very specific way. So.
Mm-hmm. Is that why too? I mean, I know that it seems as though recently houses have to be put up now, right? Because of the hurricanes. That's all due to this whole impact as well. Is that right? That the rising.
Well, I think generally a lot of our communities are historically built in the floodplain.
Right.
So
you have to,
and we've adopted rules in each of the towns. Are all a little bit different, but unfortunately, you have to establish some standards so that we're even sometimes suggesting that people go above, because it's going to continue. If you're going to go to and invest a couple $100,000 in your property, what's the difference of going up another foot or two than while you're doing it, because you're probably never going to do that for a long period of time. So
I see. Wow, it's really important. We're going to look at another graphic to talk about upcoming events.
Sure.
And see where you're going, because I guess you have a lot going on, it sounds like, in the fall. So here, if you can talk to us about what's going on here.
Sure. We've had a couple of pop-up events. I think we've got another one scheduled in Old Saybrook coming up, so I'll let Chris talk about that. But we've got some public workshops. The pop-up events are very informal. You can show up at the tent and just talk with the staff, whereas these workshops are going to have detailed presentations explaining in much more detail what we're going to do over the next year, when the meetings are going to be, what the outcomes of the meetings are going to be. But we've got the first one scheduled on September 13th at Westbrook Town Hall from 6:30 to 8 p.m. in the multipurpose room. So we would encourage people to physically show up for that. That's an in-person meeting.
Does anybody have to register for these?
Nope.
Or you just show up? You just show up and present?
Yeah, we're hoping for a good attendance. We've obviously reserved the multipurpose room, which is the larger room that we have in town halls, to accommodate a crowd. So we would encourage people, and they can also interact. There'll be some opportunities to do some of the similar things that you do at the pop-up event, but these will be designed to really talk in more detail about.
That's what I was wondering, because when you say workshop,
yes,
I wonder where is the interaction? Is it problem solving? Is it sharing? But they will have time to.
We're keeping that a secret, but
all right. So there you go, a teaser.
Yes,
that's always good, Peter.
Teaser,
that's very good. People have to go to see what's really happening.
That's right. That's right. And then we're going to do a virtual opportunity. It's that time of year where people have sometimes gone home for the summer vacation. So we're going to provide a virtual opportunity on September 26th. At 6:30 in the evening as well. So we'll put the Zoom link. I think it may already be on there, but we'll put the Zoom link on the website for people to link into that. And I'll let Chris jump in for about the last workshop.
So September 30th, the Town of Old Saybrook has their Arts and Crafts Festival.
Yeah.
And we'll be holding a pop-up, actually not on the green, but in front of
that's nice. So it'll be right there.
In front of the Kate. So people can, from Saybrook, Westbrook, and Old Saybrook, are welcome to come and meet our consultants. I'll be there. We'll pass out some literature. We'll get feedback. And
that's a great way to use that opportunity. People will be there for the other. And that's September 30th?
September 30th.
Yeah. And that'll be great. Were the consultants there? Are they at each pop-up? I don't know if I met them. Okay, so they must have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There might be different consultants, but they're spreading it around a little bit. But yeah, they will be there mostly in person, and some of our staff will be there as well.
Yeah. How many consultants are there that are part of this project?
That's a good question. It's probably I would say about a dozen.
Oh, there are that many?
Yeah, behind the scenes. Many of them are behind the scenes. There's a project manager and some folks who do a lot of the presentations, but they've got a lot of the technical people behind, the engineers and the folks who are doing the modeling and things like that. So
how do you interact with them? I didn't realize there was such a contingency of consultants. So is there I guess it's a project manager that talks to the committee?
So we meet as an executive committee in addition to the behind-the-scenes work that we do. We meet twice a month. So we have a pretty aggressive timeline, and in order for us to get this study done in a year, we meet twice a month.
That's amazing.
During the day.
So it's a lot of almost front-loading to get this project going.
Yeah, I was going to say we've made a big commitment to community engagement and reaching out to people and encouraging them to participate. We really need to hear from the folks who are most impacted by this early and often. That's why we're front-loading a lot of these events, to get people to come to these so we can hear what the problems are, so that we make sure we've got the, we look at the solutions.
I have to ask you about the QR code on these.
Sure.
Where does the QR code take you? Just right to the website?
To the website. And
you can actually, you mentioned this is interactive, the website?
Yeah, it has an interactive map where you can zoom into almost your individual property level and put a little bullet comment.
A little memo there on concerns?
Identify if it's a problem area or if it's something that needs to be protected, or maybe you have a suggestion as to what we should be doing as a potential solution. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but it has that opportunity as well.
Oh, yeah, I think that's great, especially when you say you'll have the plan ready in the year.
Yes.
And then it sounds like for the next year, after this is done in July, you're going to actually be looking at projects.
Yes.
Things that will be done.
Correct.
Do you think it'll go then with you'll do a year-by-year thing? Is that how you'll do for this, even for the grant to start it, you had to apply?
We haven't worked all that out. We talked a little bit about, the future multi-town cooperation. Each town is doing things a little bit differently, but I think it would be very helpful to maintain the executive committee and continue to meet, obviously not every 2 weeks, but periodically to chart the progress and make sure we're all staying on top of things.
Sure. What will the winter look like then? Will you be continuing to meet in the winter?
Definitely. There's some activity, some of the research and problem solving will be done over the winter time. And then in the springtime, we'll start throwing out the possible projects, recommendations, and getting a sense from the community which ones are most important, which ones are going to benefit, the most properties or, multiple towns. We're going to look at sort of town-specific projects, but we're also going to probably look at some maybe multi-town projects that are going to benefit, a couple of different towns. We, as we said earlier, we share some resources amongst the towns.
Yeah.
Some of the watersheds encompass both towns, so we're going to have to look at those kinds of solutions as well.
Yeah, a very comprehensive part. So how do you encourage people to get involved? You have the pop-up, are there other, you have this information, does this information go out, is it posted?
We've distributed it to the
yeah.
Council of Beaches. We've posted it on websites. It's on our little electronic message. So we're looking at, I think there's going to be an article in Harbor News. We're here today.
Yes, today, and we'll post it, so
promote
that'll
that.
be, get that information out.
Yeah, I think the message is to go to the website, early and often, and see what's going on with the planning process, and provide your comments, and,
Sure.
and attend these meetings, because that's why we're hosting them. The plan is only going to be as good as the input that we receive from the communities.
I certainly hope you get the input, because I know, as I said, the one I went to was well attended as well. And I do hope you'll get that information, maybe the data on how many people did participate or how much of the population, because that's also going to be very encouraging.
Yes.
I hope you'll get a good turnout for this. But I want to thank you, and we'll be keeping an eye on this as it goes along, because it is a very great plan, and it's very energetic to do that in a year, so it's great. Yeah.
And we'd be happy
Thank you.
we'd be happy to come back as we go through the process and give you updates when some of the ideas are being generated. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in today. Please make sure to go to their website to see what you can do to add your voice to this very important issue. Also, send any feedbacks, comments, or questions to shorethingsct.org. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care.